Well, I guess essentially it's about being respectful. So respect should be at the heart of every intention in every interaction that we have with children. One of the ways that I use respectful practice is through my language. So making sure my language is really empowering and positive when I'm talking to children. And then when I am talking to children, making sure it's a conversation. So even with our youngest infants, whether it's verbal communication or non-verbal communication, but just making sure it's a conversation so it's reciprocal. And then including them in anything that's happening to them or is happening around them. So just making sure that they're really an active participant in the care moment. And then any sort of interactions that I do have with children are really unhurried and just making sure they're really calm and uninterrupted with that trusted kaiako. And I guess making sure you're really giving that child your full focus and making that moment about them. So not talking to a teacher across the room or letting it be interrupted by anything else that's happening around you. It's a moment like these that really fill up their emotional buckets. So their needs are met and they feel safe. So they're ready for exploring and learning. And these moments also are helping to form those secure attachments with that trusted person, that trusted teacher. Another way that I use respectful practice is through freedom of movement. So it's about kind of observing them and allowing them to move freely without any interruption and not putting them into positions that they can't already get into on their own. So, for example, a young infant that's not sitting up yet, ensuring that you're lying them down so they can learn to understand their bodies and get into those positions on their own and build those muscles without putting them into those positions. And then all of a sudden they're feeling unsafe and worried about what's happening to them. And then, yeah, moving on to kind of the environment, thinking about how the environment should also evoke that value of respect as well. Something I like to kind of use is yes spaces. So kind of making sure the environment is suited to their capabilities. It gives them the freedom to explore without restriction or not having to say, no, you can't climb on that, or no, you can't do that. So it's about setting up the environment to make sure that there's a lot of opportunity for uninterrupted plays, that we don't have to interrupt and say, no, well, we can say, yes, you can do that, you can climb on that. So I guess all the practices that I did talk about should help to support children to become secure, capable, and competent learners. So those feelings of being safe and secure by building that trusting relationship through that freedom of movement where they feel safe. If children feel safe, then they are more likely to engage in learning and explore their worlds to develop skills. Also through that active participation, so supporting them to be capable and gain those feelings of empowerment through those care moments and things. I guess one of the main philosophies that inspires my practice is the RIE philosophy, which is the Resource for Infant Educators. That philosophy was founded by Magda Gerber and Amy Pickler, and essentially the whole philosophy is underpinned by that value of respect. But I would say if anyone is really interested in that respectful practice, that would be a good place to start. So one of the other theorists that inspires my practice is John Bowlby. He essentially believes that a secure attachment creates the most positive outcomes for children, and that the way to do that is through primary caregiving. So that's the optimal environment for children to form that secure attachment. The last is the Reggio Emilia philosophy, in particular the image of the child. So that kind of talks about how the way that we view children shapes the way that we respond to them. So if we're viewing children as capable and competent, then we should be responding to them in that way as well. I do think the same ideas do relate to all age groups, but I think it will just look differently depending on the age of the child and the stage that they're at. So the active participation that I talked about will look quite different from an infant than it would for a 4-year-old. It could be that you're supporting more of their independence at that 4-year-old age group than you are as an infant. Well, I guess lots of ECE environments can be quite busy at times. Um, so sometimes you'll find that everybody has needs and they all want to be met at the same time. And that can be really challenging, especially in an infant space. So I guess the one thing that's really important is communication. So if there's really good communication within the team, then it can work really well. So it's just that constant communication throughout the day, starting with a plan for the day about who needs what when, and then just constantly checking in with your team about what changes need to be made. Maybe this child is actually more tired than this child, so we'll change things around a bit and we'll take this child first. But that communication is key. Another challenge I thought of was especially some of those older children, them saying no to wanting to do things, or, you offer a nappy change and they're saying, no, I don't want to do that, or getting that pushback from them. And there are definitely lots of things in early childhood that we do need to do. So, for example, a nappy change, we can't leave it all day for them to keep saying no. So something really helpful is to give them warnings. If you can see that they're really engaged in their play moment or a learning experience, then giving them a warning. I see that your nappy needs changing, but once you've finished this experience, then we're going to change your nappy, or in 5 minutes or in 2 minutes, we're going to change your nappy. And then that gives them the expectation that it needs to be done. And making sure you go back and then revisit that, but also giving them options. I think them being able to make that choice is really empowering. So I have one more challenge, I guess you could say, is when your team is not on the same page with practices. Maybe your respectful practices aren't consistent across the whole team. So I think something to keep in mind is that same respectful practice that you have and you're using with the children is to use it with your team as well. When you're communicating with them, always communicate with respect. I think it's really important to have a conversation with your team and to really understand if you have the same ideas of what respectful practice is and what it looks like in your centre. It can just be that you have a different idea of what it is. So I think, even if it means that you're going to do some research together and bring it back and say, hey, I think this is really important because of this, and how are we going to do this? What does it look like in our space? And then coming together on a shared purpose, a shared goal, so that you're on the same page. Another good way to communicate is sharing communication styles. So sharing how you like to be communicated with and how you like to communicate with others, whether it's on the floor in the moment, you prefer your team to talk to you about practices and things in the moment, or if you prefer to have a moment off the floor, there's things like that. And I think, yeah, all teachers are learning. We're all constantly learning. There's always constantly change in research and practices and things. So I think the more we communicate and have that conversation together, then I think the better outcomes for children in general.